How does a bastard, orphan, son of a whore and a Scotsman dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean by Providence, impoverished, in squalor, grow up to be a hero and a scholar? This is where our story starts. On the small island of Nevis, a speck of green in the bright blue sea. This place was beautiful, but life there could be incredibly hard. Alexander Hamilton was born into a world that seemed designed to hold him down. His father, James Hamilton, came from a good family in Scotland but never found his footing, and he left when Alexander was just a boy. This left young Hamilton and his mother, Rachel Fawcett, to fend for themselves. They were outsiders, looked down upon, and without the protection of a husband, Rachel had to fight for every scrap of dignity and every piece of bread. Life threw everything it had at this kid. He wasn't just poor, he was an outcast. His mother had been married before, and the laws of the time were cruel to women who left their husbands, no matter the reason. Because of this, Alexander was considered illegitimate, which meant he couldn't go to the regular church school. He had to learn from his mother and from a small Jewish school that would take him in. He learned about struggle firsthand, seeing his mother work tirelessly to run a small shop. He saw debt, he saw sickness, and he saw the back-breaking labor of the sugar plantations all around him. This wasn't a childhood of games and ease, it was a daily lesson in survival, a masterclass in how the world really works when the chips are down. Then, when things seemed like they couldn't get any worse, they did. A terrible fever swept through their town. Alexander got sick, so sick he almost didn't make it. But he pulled through. His mother, Rachel, who nursed him back to health, wasn't so lucky. She died, leaving Alexander and his older brother James Jr. as orphans before he was even a teenager. He was now truly alone. He was passed around to different relatives, but tragedy followed. His cousin, who took him in, died by suicide. It was a relentless storm of loss and instability. For most people, this would be the end of the story. A sad tale of a boy swallowed by the harsh realities of the 18th century Caribbean. But for Hamilton, this was just the beginning. The fire was lit. Inside him, something was forged in all that hardship. A relentless drive, an ambition that was as big and powerful as the ocean around him. He knew he couldn't stay. He saw the world as a place of systems, of trade, of money, of power, and he was determined to understand them, to master them. He started working as a clerk for a trading company, and it was here, surrounded by ledgers and shipping manifests, that his genius started to shine. He had a mind for numbers and a way with words that was far beyond his years. He was hungry, desperate to prove that he was more than his circumstances, more than the world told him he was. The Caribbean had given him a hurricane of a childhood, and he was about to become a hurricane himself. There's a million things he hasn't done, but just you wait. Stuck behind a desk in St. Croix managing shipments of sugar and rum, Hamilton was doing the work of a man twice his age, but his mind was always racing, dreaming of something bigger. He wasn't just counting barrels, he was reading. He devoured every book he could get his hands on. History, philosophy, poetry. He was teaching himself, building an arsenal of knowledge in his head. And he started to write. He wrote poems, he wrote letters, he wrote essays. He poured all of his hopes, his frustrations, and his brilliant observations onto the page. His pen was his escape, his tool, his weapon. It was the one thing he owned that could build a bridge from his small island to the entire world. Then, in 1772, nature itself gave him his opportunity. A massive hurricane, a true monster of a storm, slammed into the island. The winds howled, the sea rose, and homes were torn to pieces. It was a scene of total devastation, a nightmare brought to life. Hamilton, only about 17 years old, witnessed it all, and he did what he did best. He wrote. He penned a letter to his father, describing the storm with such power, such emotion, and such vivid detail that it was more than just a letter. It was a piece of art. He described the scream of the wind and the roar of the sea, painting a picture of divine fury and human helplessness. He wrote with the passion of a poet and the precision of a journalist. That letter was his shot. He didn't keep it to himself. He showed it to a local minister, Hugh Knox, who was a mentor to him. Knox was so blown away by the raw talent and intellectual power in the letter that he knew it couldn't stay hidden. He arranged to have it published in the Royal Danish American Gazette, the local newspaper. When the people of St. Croix read it, they were stunned. Who was this young clerk who could write with such force and eloquence? They saw something special in him, a spark of genius that was too bright to be confined to a counting house on their small island. They saw a mind that deserved a bigger stage. The community leaders, the merchants, and his boss, Nicholas Kruger, decided to act. They saw his potential, his ambition, and they knew he was meant for more. So they took up a collection. They raised enough money to send this brilliant, determined orphan to the North American colonies for a formal education. It was his ticket out. His words had literally built him a ship. As he sailed away from the only home he had ever known, he was heading toward a new world, a new life, and a revolution that was just beginning to stir. He was not throwing away his shot. He was on his way to New York, ready to change his life, and in doing so, to change the world. When he got to New York, he was a man on a mission. He walked the busy streets, a city teeming with energy, debate, and the first whispers of rebellion against Great Britain. This was the place to be, and Hamilton drank it all in. He enrolled at King's College, which is now Columbia University, and he hit the books with a ferocity that left his classmates and professors in awe. He was making up for lost time, devouring subjects like math, law, and political theory at a dizzying pace. He wasn't just trying to catch up, he was trying to get ahead. He was a foreigner, an immigrant with no family name or fortune to back him up. All he had was his mind and his unstoppable work ethic. But the classroom couldn't contain his energy. The air in the colonies was thick with tension. People were talking about liberty, tyranny, and the rights of man. Speeches were being made on street corners, and pamphlets were being passed from hand to hand. Hamilton, the writer, jumped right into the fray. He started writing anonymous pamphlets of his own, defending the colonist cause against loyalist writers who supported the king. His arguments were so sharp, so well-reasoned, and so powerful that people thought they must have been written by an experienced political leader, not some college kid from the Caribbean. He was already making a name for himself, using his pen to fight for the ideals of his new home. Then the talk turned to action. The first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord. The American Revolution had begun. For Hamilton, this was not a time to stand on the sidelines. He believed in the cause with every fiber of his being. He wanted to do more than just write about freedom. He wanted to fight for it. He joined a volunteer militia company in New York, and his natural leadership abilities quickly became clear. He wasn't just smart, he was organized and brave. He studied military tactics and artillery with the same intensity he had applied to his college studies. He was determined to prove his worth on the battlefield, to earn his place in this new nation through courage and sacrifice. He quickly raised his own artillery company and was elected its captain, Captain Alexander Hamilton. It had a nice ring to it. He and his men saw action in the early, difficult days of the war, fighting in battles around New York City. They were dark times for the Continental Army, marked by retreat and defeat, but Hamilton distinguished himself with his coolness under fire and his tactical skill. He was no longer just a poor orphan or a brilliant student. He was an American officer, a man willing to lay down his life for the promise of a new country. He was rising up, and the most important man in America was about to take notice. The story of tonight was being written in gunpowder and ink. His reputation for brilliance and bravery did not go unnoticed. It reached the ears of the one man who mattered most, the Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, General George Washington. Washington was a man who needed smart, loyal, and tireless people around him. The war was a chaotic and desperate affair, and he was drowning in paperwork, logistics, and strategic planning. He needed someone who could think as fast as he could, who could write with clarity and force, and who could be trusted with the most sensitive secrets of the Revolution. He needed a right-hand man. In 1777, he found him. Washington offered the young Captain Hamilton a position on his personal staff as an aide-de-camp. For Hamilton, this was an incredible honor but also a source of frustration. He had longed for glory on the battlefield, for a chance to lead men in a heroic charge. Instead, he was being asked to wield a pen again, not a sword. But he knew this was an opportunity he could not refuse. He accepted the position with the rank of lieutenant colonel. He was now at the very center of the war effort, the room where it happens. He worked side by side with Washington day in and day out. He drafted letters to Congress, wrote orders to generals, and helped manage the endless logistical nightmare of supplying a starving, poorly equipped army. He became Washington's voice, translating the general's thoughts into powerful and persuasive prose. Washington came to rely on Hamilton completely. He saw in the young man not just a brilliant mind but a shared vision for what America could be. Hamilton was more than a secretary. He was a trusted advisor. They spent countless hours together discussing strategy, politics, and the future of the nation. Washington, the steady, patient Virginia planter, and Hamilton, the fiery, ambitious immigrant, formed an unlikely but powerful bond. It was like a father-son relationship. Washington admired Hamilton's genius and energy, while Hamilton revered Washington's character and leadership. He learned more about power, politics, and leadership at Washington's side than he ever could have from a book. Still, the desire for battlefield command burned inside him. He felt stuck behind a desk, while others were winning fame in combat. He pestered Washington constantly for a field command. He wanted his moment. He wanted to prove he was more than just a writer. Finally, near the end of the war, Washington gave in. He gave Hamilton command of a battalion for the decisive siege of Yorktown. Hamilton led his men in a daring nighttime bayonet charge against a key British redoubt. He was fearless, leading from the front, and his men captured the position in a swift and heroic assault. It was the moment of glory he had craved. He had proven himself as both a thinker and a fighter, a man of words and a man of action. After the war was won, the cannons fell silent. America was free, but it was also, well, a mess. The country was not a single unified nation, but a loose and quarreling collection of 13 states, held together by a weak agreement called the Articles of Confederation. The central government had no power to tax, no way to pay its debts from the war, and no ability to solve disputes between the states. Hamilton saw this weakness as a fatal flaw. He had fought for a new nation, not just a collection of squabbling territories. He knew that for America to survive and prosper, it needed a strong, energetic, and effective national government. This became his new fight, his new obsession. He settled in New York City with his wife, Eliza Schuyler, from a wealthy and influential New York family. He became a lawyer, and as with everything else he did, he excelled. He was a brilliant legal mind, quickly establishing himself as one of the top lawyers in the city. But he never stopped thinking about the bigger picture. He saw merchants struggling because each state had its own currency. He saw veterans who had been paid with worthless government IOUs. He saw a nation that was weak on the world stage, unable to command respect. He was non-stop, writing essays and giving speeches, arguing passionately for a new system of government. His vision was clear. He believed in a strong federal government that could unite the states, manage a national economy, and build a powerful nation that could stand with the great powers of Europe. He wanted a national bank to stabilize the currency and provide credit for businesses. He wanted the federal government to take on the state's war debts, which would bind the wealthy and powerful to the success of the nation. He wanted to encourage manufacturing and industry, not just farming, to make America economically independent. These were radical ideas at the time. Many people, like his future rival Thomas Jefferson, feared that a strong central government would become a new form of tyranny, just like the British king they had just overthrown. Hamilton, however, was not afraid. He had seen firsthand during the war how weakness and disorganization could nearly destroy the cause of liberty. He believed that true liberty required order, stability, and strength. He worked tirelessly to make his vision a reality. He was elected as a delegate from New York to the Congress of the Confederation, where he pushed for reform from within. He called for a convention of the states to discuss the problems facing the country. He knew that simply amending the old Articles of Confederation wouldn't be enough. They needed to start over. They needed to design a whole new government, one built to last. His legal mind was now fully dedicated to the biggest case of his life, the United States of America. The call for a convention was answered. In the summer of 1787, delegates from the states gathered in Philadelphia to fix the broken government. This became the Constitutional Convention. Hamilton was there as a delegate from New York, ready to argue for his vision of a strong, centralized nation. He gave a famous 6-hour speech where he laid out his ideal form of government, which was even more powerful than what most delegates were willing to consider. While not all of his specific ideas were adopted, his powerful voice and relentless energy helped push the convention toward creating a much stronger federal government than the one that existed under the Articles of Confederation. When the convention finally produced the new Constitution, the work was only half done. Now, it had to be ratified or approved by at least 9 of the 13 states. This was no sure thing. Many powerful voices rose up against it. These so-called anti-federalists feared the new Constitution created a government that was too big, too powerful, and a threat to the rights of individuals and the states. They wrote articles and gave speeches, trying to convince the public to reject it. The fate of the nation hung in the balance. The Constitution could have easily died right there, a forgotten historical document. Hamilton knew he had to act, one last time, to save the dream of a united nation. He decided to launch a massive public relations campaign to convince the people, especially in his home state of New York where opposition was fierce, to support the new Constitution. He came up with a plan to write a series of essays that would explain and defend every part of the new framework of government. He recruited two other brilliant men to help him, James Madison of Virginia, who would later be known as the father of the Constitution, and John Jay, a seasoned diplomat from New York. Working together under the shared pseudonym Publius, they began writing at a furious pace. They would publish their essays in New York newspapers, hoping to sway public opinion. This series of 85 essays became known as the Federalist Papers. It is one of the most important works of political philosophy ever written, and Hamilton was the engine behind it. He wrote an astonishing 51 of the 85 essays himself. He was a machine, churning out thousands of words of brilliant persuasive argument week after week. He wrote about the need for a strong executive branch, the importance of a federal court system, and the powers of taxation and national defense. He broke down the complex language of the Constitution into clear, logical arguments. The Federalist Papers were a masterclass in persuasion, and they had a huge impact, not just in New York but across the country. They helped turn the tide of public opinion and secure the ratification of the Constitution. With the Constitution ratified and George Washington elected as the first president, it was time to build the new government from the ground up. Washington knew exactly who he needed to tackle the country's biggest problem, its disastrous finances. He appointed Alexander Hamilton as the first-ever Secretary of the Treasury. At just 34 years old, Hamilton was now in charge of the nation's economy. The country was broke, its credit was worthless, and its future was uncertain. It was a monumental task, but if anyone was up for it, it was Hamilton. He was finally in the room where the biggest decisions were made, and he had a plan. Hamilton immediately went to work, writing a series of brilliant and controversial reports to Congress. His first major proposal was that the new federal government should take on all the war debts, including the debts of the individual states. This was called assumption. Many states, especially in the South, had already paid off most of their debts and they hated this idea. They didn't want to pay taxes to help bail out the northern states. This led to a huge political fight. To get his plan passed, Hamilton had to make a deal. In a famous private dinner with his rivals Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, he agreed to support moving the nation's capital south to a new city on the Potomac River, what would become Washington, D.C. in exchange for their support for his financial plan. Next, Hamilton called for the creation of a Bank of the United States. This national bank would act as the government's financial agent, holding its deposits, issuing a stable paper currency, and providing loans to spur economic growth. This was another radical idea that sparked fierce opposition. Jefferson and his followers argued that the Constitution did not give the federal government the power to create a bank. They believed in a strict interpretation of the Constitution. Hamilton, however, argued for a loose interpretation, saying that the Constitution gave the government implied powers to do what was necessary and proper to carry out its duties. Washington sided with Hamilton, and the bank was created. Finally, Hamilton wanted to build a vibrant American economy based on more than just farming. He proposed a system of tariffs, taxes on imported goods, to protect and encourage American manufacturing. He envisioned a future of bustling cities, innovative factories, and a powerful industrial nation. He laid out a detailed plan to support new industries and build a diverse economy. Not all of these plans were immediately adopted, but he had laid the foundation. In just a few years, through sheer genius and political will, Hamilton had created a stable financial system from scratch. He established public credit, created a national currency, and set the United States on a course to become an economic powerhouse. Hamilton's bold vision and powerful personality did not just win him allies, they also created powerful enemies. His belief in a strong central government, a national bank, and an industrial future put him in direct conflict with other founding fathers who had a very different vision for America. His greatest rival was Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence, dreamed of a nation of small, independent farmers. He feared that Hamilton's plans would create a powerful, corrupt government dominated by bankers and wealthy industrialists, much like the British system they had fought to escape. Their disagreement was not just about policy, it was a fundamental clash of philosophies about the soul of America. This clash led to the creation of the first political parties. Hamilton's supporters became known as the Federalists, while Jefferson and his ally James Madison led the Democratic Republicans. The political battles of the 1790s were incredibly bitter and personal. Newspapers, funded by each side, attacked the opposing leaders with vicious insults and accusations. Hamilton was accused of being a secret monarchist who wanted to betray the revolution. Jefferson was accused of being a radical revolutionary who wanted to bring the chaos of the French Revolution to America. The rivalry between these two brilliant men shaped the course of American politics for a generation. Another major rival was Aaron Burr. Burr was a fellow New Yorker, a lawyer, a soldier, and a politician of immense ambition, just like Hamilton. But where Hamilton was driven by passionate belief and ideology, Burr was seen as a man driven purely by his own self-interest. They were rivals in law, in politics, and in society for years. Their relationship was a long, slow-burning fire of mistrust and competition. Hamilton deeply distrusted Burr's character and consistently used his own political influence to block Burr's ambitions, most famously in the presidential election of 1800 and later in the 1804 race for governor of New York. The final straw came in 1804. After losing the election for governor, Burr read in a newspaper that Hamilton had expressed a despicable opinion of him. Enraged and feeling his honor had been publicly insulted, Burr demanded an apology. Hamilton, bound by the rigid code of honor of the time, refused to back down. Burr challenged him to a duel. On the morning of July 11, 1804, the two men met on the dueling grounds in Weehawken, New Jersey. They stood, aimed their pistols, and fired. Hamilton was struck in the abdomen and fell, mortally wounded. He died the next day, his brilliant career cut short by a political rivalry that had spiraled into deadly violence. His last letter to his wife Eliza was signed, "Your obedient servant, A. Ham." For a long time after his death, Hamilton's story was not the one that was most often told. His rivals, like Jefferson and Madison, outlived him by decades and went on to become presidents. They had the chance to shape their own legacies and, in doing so, to diminish his. For many years, Hamilton was seen as an elitist, an enemy of the common man, a figure whose vision for America had lost out to Jefferson's. His contributions were noted in history books, but his personal story, the incredible journey of the immigrant orphan who became a founding father, was often overlooked. But a legacy is a funny thing. It can fade, but it can also be rediscovered and reborn. The foundations he built for America, however, never went away. The financial system he designed, with a national bank and public credit, created the economic stability that allowed the young nation to grow and thrive. The strong federal government he championed in the Constitution and the Federalist Papers became the bedrock of American power and unity, proving essential for navigating challenges from the Civil War to the Great Depression. His arguments for the implied powers of the Constitution gave the government the flexibility it needed to adapt to a changing world. While Jefferson's vision of an agrarian republic is a beautiful part of the American story, it is Hamilton's vision of a dynamic, industrial, and financially powerful nation that America largely became. His face is on our money. Look at a $10 bill, and you will see him there. It's a daily reminder of the man who created the very treasury that issues it. This is a unique honor for someone who was never a president. It's a testament to the fact that his role in building the nation's economic infrastructure was just as important as the political leadership of the presidents he served. His ideas are still debated in Congress, his legal arguments are still cited in courtrooms, and his vision for America's place in the world continues to shape foreign policy. He is not a forgotten figure. He is woven into the very fabric of the country. And then, in the 21st century, something amazing happened. A Broadway musical, Hamilton, an American musical, took his story and brought it to life for a whole new generation. Using hip-hop, jazz, and R&B, the show told the story of this young, scrappy, and hungry immigrant who changed the world. It made his struggles, his genius, and his ambition feel immediate and relevant. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Alexander Hamilton. His story of overcoming adversity to make an indelible mark on the world became an inspiration for millions. The orphan from the Caribbean finally got his full story told, proving that it doesn't matter where you come from, what matters is the world you choose to build.